Hello and welcome to The Appointment. I'm Pranjal Sharma. Joining me today for a conversation is Saurabh Srivastava, who's a doyen of the technology industry in India. Saurabh is the co-founder of NASSCOM, the Indian Angel Network, as well as the Indus entrepreneur. Saurabh, thank you so much for being with us. I must begin by congratulating you also for the honor that the government has bestowed. You are now a Padam Shri as well. I want to discuss with you, Saurabh, about your journey as an entrepreneur and also somebody who created and helped create an industry in India. I want to go back to the beginning of NASSCOM. We're also talking about this at the time when we were looking at 25 years of India's economic reforms. How was it in the early 90s when you thought that an institution like NASSCOM is important and required?
When we started out, when we founded NASSCOM, it was way back in 1988. The IT industry in India was less than $50 million. At that time, I was running Tata Unisys, which was 1/3 of the software industry. TCS was 40%. And I don't remember how big they were. Infosys may have been $500,000 or something like that. It was very, very difficult to do business. We had 160% import duty on software. Same thing with hardware. We were trying to run a global business because our entire market was overseas, was not in India. Computerization was a bad word in India in those socialistic days.
And telecom connectivity was very poor.
And for telecom connectivity, if you didn't make a call from Delhi to Bombay before 7 in the morning, you had to wait till 11 at night. And we were running a global business. Tata Unisys, we were in 41 countries. You can imagine what it took to do that business. If you traveled overseas, you could take $8 with you. And we had 11 overseas offices. It was a very, very difficult time to do business. So two things happened. First, all of us who were in it I could see very clearly that this is a phenomenal opportunity. It's a phenomenal business. There's an unlimited overseas market. We are very well positioned to be as good or better than all of our foreign competitors. Huge profitability, great margins. So we saw huge potential. We felt this could be much bigger than the IT hardware business. And alongside that, you had an environment where it was almost impossible to do this business. So we said, how do we deal with this? And the first thing we thought of, we said, look, individual companies, already very small, talking to government, doesn't work. Most people in government are well-meaning, but they didn't really understand what the issues were. So we said we need to create an industry body where we come together and then we try and explain to government what we need. But there was another reason. The other reason was that we were actually in a business which was very unique. So we were doing software development, that's right. But we were doing software development in India for markets globally. That was our only model. There was no other part of the world where companies were doing that. So if we said we're doing well, what's best practice?
So in some ways you also created a model for the rest of the world, not just for India.
This whole idea of what you might call offshore software development, the offshoring, is a model we created. So what we did do, and most people who say that where is the innovation and what the software industry did, intellectual coolies, just simply do not understand what we did. We actually took the entire chain of software, right from a customer requirement down to the last line of code development and testing. We disaggregated that chain. We did individual parts of it very differently. We put it together and then we delivered the same thing of a much better quality. So we completely innovated. And we realized that actually the other reason to have a body of ourselves was we had to learn from each other. I mean, if I sat down and say, how well am I doing as a company? and said, so what are the best practices? What are my salary costs as a percentage of total costs? What are my communication costs? Who do I compare it with? Not Accenture, it has a different model.
There
not
were no
IBM.
benchmarks.
No benchmarks. The only benchmarks we had were each other.
But that also set a model, Saurabh, where it was again new in many ways for Indian companies to work together with each other. And today, if I look at how NASSCOM is and how the technology sector works, I think some of that DNA maintains, and it still manifests itself in the collaboration that we see at the highest level today.
I think it's unique for industry bodies, not just in India, but globally, to have this model. I told you the reason why this happened, and remember at that time, all of us were starting out. Around the time I founded NASSCOM, co-founded NASSCOM, was also around the time I founded my first company. And most of us were doing that at that time. So nobody was anybody. We were all startups. We all had no money. We were all professionals. We never made a distinction between being an owner and being a professional in your own company, because that's who we were. We all started as trainees somewhere. And we found that we had huge need to collaborate. It helped each one of us to do it. And to give you an idea, when I founded IS Infotech, it took me a year to get government permissions to start the company. My entire model was based on development through communication lines. All you could get at that time was a line which was 9.6K. Mostly worked at half the speed. Mostly worked at half the speed and only worked half the time. That's what we had at that time. And in that scenario, we all were able to work very closely together.
Saurabh, you've been telling us about the atmosphere in the 90s when you helped create NASSCOM, which also allowed the creation of the global technology giants that we see today. Since then, the culture of entrepreneurship has also taken root, especially for first generation professionals. You don't need to have a business background. How different is it today? And tell us a little bit about how Indian Angel Network has contributed to this.
The one learning that one had in NASSCOM in the IT industry is that first generation entrepreneurship is something that can make dramatic difference. In 25 years, we've created an industry that when we founded NASSCOM, we thought would be $1 billion someday. It was 160 billion last year. Direct, indirect employment of 10 million people, contribution of 20-30% to our exports. So what it said to me and to all of us is, listen, we can dream big. And really entrepreneurs can make a big difference. And so to some extent, my focus after I'd done my first company, exited, did another company, exited, was maybe it's more interesting for me to really help create a large number of companies than do one more company myself. And so the first thing I did is, along with some friends, we did a venture capital fund called Infinity in 1999. First VC fund in the private sector. And we created 19 companies. Some marquee names like India Bulls, Indus, some very well-known names. And then from there, one realized that we needed to kind of somehow build the right kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem. And if you look at the US, in a typical year, VCs put close to $25 billion in 5,000 companies. Angels put $26 billion in 50,000 companies. 1 in 10 succeeds, needs 10 times the money. Now, we had an inverted pyramid. You can't reap what you don't sow. So the thought was, after Infinity, is, listen, we need to build the angel community. Now, that's hard to build because globally, Rockefellers and Fords have not known to be angel investors. It's largely first generation entrepreneurs who had one or more cycle of wealth creation, because for them, being in business was not a matter of destiny, but an accident. And after a while, you get bored and and you are happy to sort of become a coach.
But you had a
from being
different, different agenda, because you had experienced the pangs of starting something new, and tried to struggle through lack of resources, capital, government support.
All of that. And so in some ways, I felt that all of us who had been through that experience were very well positioned to help entrepreneurs. Like when we were growing our companies, we were profitable, but there was no venture capital. So it took us much longer to scale. If you look at any company, Infosys for example, look at how much they grew in the first 10 years versus the next 10 and the next 10, right? So out of that, the idea was, let's create an angel group. And again, just like NASSCOM, it's amazing if it's the right idea at the right time, where it goes.
In some ways, Saurabh, it brings to my mind the thought that you've been like a cement which has been bringing a lot of these industry leaders together, putting it an institution in place. So, you know, they might be individual bricks, but the cement brings them together. And building an institution is really what is far more important than just the individual companies, and that must have been had its challenges.
Well, at one level, yes, I've been fortunate to be in this place at a time when we were seeing so many possibilities. But you are right. It's not that I want to belittle formation of companies. I've done startups, so I know how hard they are to do. But building institutions is immensely more difficult because you're dealing with peers. You could be I was chairman of NASSCOM, but or let's say of TIE. But the only authority you have as chairman is what your peers are willing to give you. It's not by virtue of shareholding, not by virtue of being a CEO. Much harder to build, but immensely more impactful.
And long lasting.
And long lasting, because if you look at NASSCOM, if we didn't have NASSCOM when we did it, I really doubt whether the software industry would be where it is today. The STPI scheme, which transformed the industry, came through a collaboration of NASSCOM and the Department of Electronics. So if you look at the Angel Group, when I founded it, let's say like NASSCOM, and we thought we'd be $1 billion someday, I said, well, you know, we'll do some angel investing amongst friends, we'll be 20, 30 people. I had not planned for the fact that we would be what I'm told is now the largest angel group in the world. 400 plus people doing an investment every 2 weeks, spread around the globe, 7 operations including London, seeing 5,000 entrepreneurs a day. But in some ways it's been transformational, because when I started this, there were no angels in the country, no angel groups. But now there are many others that have come up. Angel investing is become the single most important factor today in breeding a whole lot of entrepreneurs who can then get to the next level on venture capital and then get into private equity.
Saurabh, today the spirit of entrepreneurship, the spirit of startups in India is very vibrant. It's everywhere, and this is something which one could not have imagined a few years ago. Being a first generation entrepreneur, maybe even just out of college, was not something anybody would look up to, and you know, people were wondering whether that's even possible. How is the current atmosphere helping? Is it enough? What needs to be done now? I know that as Indus Entrepreneurs, you also have brought together a bunch of entrepreneurs to mentor young startups.
Well, the Indus Entrepreneurs again is one of the finest institutions today, certainly the largest organization in the world focused on entrepreneurship. And we built it on the whole old Indian model of the Guru Shishya tradition. Those of us who succeeded, learned something, we pass it on to wannabes, people who want to become successful. And it's very heartwarming that there's no dearth of Indians around the world. This is a movement that started in Silicon Valley, who are willing to do that. And they're able to mentor and bring people who want to be entrepreneurs up to a point where they can get angel investing from bodies like IAN, and then they can get venture capital. And all of these bodies, IAN, TIE, for example, and at NASSCOM, have been working with government on this whole idea of entrepreneurship and how important it is. To me, I think all of that work of the last 25 years has come alive in the last 2. For the first time since independence, I think you have a prime minister who's talking about entrepreneurs in a budget speech and talking about how critical it is for entrepreneurs, how critical it is for India to have entrepreneurs who will create economic growth.
And startups, not just entrepreneurs.
And startups, of course, is the first element of creating vehicles that will do that. So today, I think there's a whole slew of things that the government has done.
And you're part of it in many ways.
I'm part of it in many of those committees, yes. I mean, we just had a meeting yesterday with the Secretary of DIPP. Amazingly open. You've had Mr. Amitabh Kant, there's a previous Secretary of DIPP, Mr. Ramesh Abhishek today. Very open people who are really focused on how they can make the Startup India plan successful. So many of the announcements, so many of the implementations that have happened in this whole area are ones that we've been seeking for the last decade, for instance, last 5 years. And more than what has been done is the deep-seated conviction that many of the people hold, including the Prime Minister, on what this sector can do, what this space can do. And therefore, as some things are being done and we find that something isn't quite right, course correction is happening immediately.
Much faster than ever before.
It's happening on the fly, much faster. I mean, the reaction time is weeks and sometimes days. And that is the reason why there is this sense of excitement.
But are things changing on the ground because of the efforts of the government, or do you think there's still a bit of lag before the effects can be seen?
There's always a lag from the top to the bottom, but the lag is becoming shorter. At the top, there's no lag. Everybody knows that this is the Prime Minister's agenda. So if you go down at the top level in government, everybody pretty much is aligned. As you go lower down, it's harder. And that's why the government is doing a lot of things on ease of doing business to insulate you from the Inspector Raj, so that you're in the domain where people understand the broader objectives.
But today, Saurabh, there's also an impression that largely based on what you said, that the speed of action in government has picked up, that there is a section of the industry, not just in technology, but the larger ecosystem, which is actually holding back on change, because there is also this entire disruption which is happening because of technology. There's more competition coming in from global players. There are various other pressures, and industry wants to actually slow down and not go as fast as the government wants it to.
There are challenges for everyone. I mean, in the old days, it was the IT industry. But in the old days, the IT industry was in large corporates. It impacted efficiency. It didn't impact the person on the street directly. Now, IT is everywhere. It's in your phone, it's in your watch. And if you look at what's happening on big data, analytics, if you look communications, artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, you add it all together, every single company, no matter what it does, is getting disrupted. The startups who have no model that they have to protect,
and no legacy disadvantage.
They have no legacy disadvantage, are disrupting all industries.
But you know, the final theme I want to pick up with you, Saurabh, that all this disruption and change is creating the fear of loss of jobs, because technology-led efficiency is going to reduce the need for manpower. But in your view and your experience, do you think the excitement and the new options being created by startups, can they make up for the loss of jobs in traditional industries? Is there a way to match or fix this mismatch?
Well, the first question is, we don't have options. This is happening anyway. We may like it, we may not like it. We're in a global marketplace, so we can't do anything which doesn't connect with this whole world system. The second is that as a country in India, we can be the creators of all these solutions. Most countries don't have that option. We have our big enough markets. We have a DNA which is entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurs are coming out of the wall. Money is flowing in. We have the option to be number 2 right after the US. Who knows, maybe later number 1. The third is your thing on jobs. I mean, look at kids who are coming out of school and college today. 90%, 80% of the careers that they are looking at were not available careers when you and I came out of college. So yes, some jobs are going. A million other jobs are coming up. Don't only look at direct. I mean, you may say, well, how many people does Flipkart or Snapdeal employ? Directly. But then look at everything else. Who's delivering those packages? I mean, there's a whole bunch of different things that actually come up. Industries will change and new industries are going to get created. We don't have the answer for that. What we do know is there is no point in creating yesterday. Yesterday is gone. Fortunately for us as India, because we were not big players in yesterday's economy, we don't have much legacy. So we actually can be the disruptors globally, particularly because in so many areas we are amongst the top 3 or 4 markets in the world. So I'm a huge optimist on where this whole focus on the startup scenario is going to lead.
We have to end here our conversation, Saurabh, but must thank you for enabling and funding the creation of entrepreneurship of the technology sector in India. Thank you so much for sharing your journey.
Thank you, Pranjal. Good talking to you.